Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby-peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Did you know you can advertise on podcasts?
Don't act like you're not impressed.
Find out more at podvertise.com.au. That's podvertise with an s.com.au.
Hello and welcome back to The Nest after a brief hiatus, but it's an exciting time as an Eagles fan. It's trade time, and the Eagles, as Adam Simpson said, they would be Drew Jones, are active, one in the bag, and it looks like another couple more might be in the offing as well.
Hello, Garby. Yeah, great to be back on The Nest. And yeah, I mean, don't want to brag, but West Coast were the first team to make a trade. So we're away, we're off. And as forecast a couple of weeks ago, Zac Langdon makes his way to West Coast. And I think we can both agree that it's filling an area in the team where that's something we feel like we can improve on, that small forward area.
Yeah, it's not one to get too excited about, but that's a 2021 premiership locked up for mine. So that's it, done and dusted. There's no point in anyone else turning up next season. No, look, I think it's a good deal. Firstly, so if we break it down, it's just a good get for pick 54. Like it's a real bargain in that sense. You're getting someone who has proven he can play at AFL standard and also play in a specialist position. Like quite often late in the draft, pick 54. You're hoping to get a player in a specialist position who makes it, but really it's a long shot. Or you're picking a mid who maybe hasn't got the capabilities of being a top flight mid and then trying to slot him into another position. So we've got a small forward ready to go at that number, which is good. He's proven he can play at AFL level. Like when he first started, and if you watch his highlight reel, you can tell he's got some pace, some zip about him, smarts around goal, and can apply some pressure, which is what we need. But then he hasn't really established himself, and that included a GWS side last season who was paltry, although perhaps they knew he was leaving, so they sort of left him out of it. So I don't think it's one to get over-enthused about, but it's just a good get that adds something to our team that we needed.
Yeah, so I had a look at his stats, not only in the AFL, but also when he played for Claremont, originally from Dampier. And he pretty much averages 4 tackles and a goal across his career in senior footy. So that's as a baseline, that's a nice thing to add to your team. And he was, in his first season, which is his best season to date, where he played 21 games for the Giants, he averaged nearly 2 tackles inside 50 a game. So that's a pretty important stat these days, especially for a team in West Coast who likes to, obviously control the ball from the back, but then once it's in the forward 50, really press up and keep it there. So he's going to be effective. I put in the Patreon, pressure, movement, and menace is what he gives us. And those players don't grow on trees. They're not that easy to find. There's a special physicality and mentality that they have, which makes them a valuable commodity. So, we've basically got him for exactly what GWS paid for him initially. They used pick 56 in the draft to get him. But he's got 3 years of senior footy under his belt. He's developed into the system. He understands what's required. And I think he fits well into our ethos. He's a family man. He's fiance's gone through a little bit. She had cancer. She's come through that. So, there's definitely a story behind Zac Langdon, and we look forward to getting to know him even better.
So welcome to the Eagles, the Zac attack. Another Langdon into the forward line, following on from Big Carl, of course, the premiership player from 1992, who's a cult hero of the club and, of course, still very active in the West. So nice to have that name back in an Eagles forward line. Speaking of which, Drewy, as it stands right now, without the rest of the trade period to go, without the draft, without a pre-season, how does our forward line stack up now with Zac Langdon coming into the club?
Well, we love our forward line. I guess he potentially, does he slot in ahead of Archie? Do you think that's where he sits in the depth chart? It feels like they'd be competing for a spot. It also means, I guess, that they wouldn't have to use an Ainsworth or an O'Neill as that extra forward. They can put in a genuine pressure forward. So I think if you're a betting man, you'd say if he has a good pre-season and does everything that he needs to do, that he's probably a best 22 player.
Yeah, so I've got our forward line 6 at the moment as, JK and Darling in the key posts, Oscar Allen as the third tall, rotating between the ruck, and then your half forwards are Ryan and Cripps, and then Langdon in a pocket. I think he, as it stands right now, Adam Simpson would be, that's what all coaches do, he'd be envisaging his ideal forward line as it is. I think he's in there ahead of certainly Archie, Petrocelli, and Jared Cameron's the one that you hope might come on and find his best, but it's certainly ahead of him at the moment. So that's the way it looks right now, and it's a pretty good forward line. I mean, they tried so many options there, didn't they, throughout the season, and no one quite nailed that position. Even when Cripps was out, Langdon, I'm sure, will be the one they'll say, all right, well, we're going to give you a crack first up. You're the recruit, and hopefully he takes it.
Yeah, well, as a 26-year-old, or he's 25 now, soon to be 26, that's what you want. You want to be able to have the ability to plug him in straight away and him make an impact. I guess it does open up a couple of possibilities. If Langdon makes that spot his own, does it free up the Eagles to try Petrocelli on a wing? Could they try Jared Cameron further up the ground? Maybe, as we saw a little bit during our injury crunch and the fixture crunch, Liam Ryan up the ground a little bit more at times as well. So it does open up possibilities. I mean, there's a potential argument that Liam Ryan's in the best 25 players in the competition as it stands. So could you try him further up the ground, in patches? As good as he is, close to goal, his field kicking and creativity could slice teams open further up. So, that does give us a bit of flexibility. The Willie Rioli situation, obviously, we're monitoring that closely, but he's on the depth chart, just not available at the moment. So, we're developing a collection of players who can play a role up forward, which is good.
Yeah, I think with Liam Ryan, you just say to him, listen, we want you around the 50 as much as possible, but you can do what you want. Like, you're that good now. We have so much faith in you. You can run where you want. Don't be limited by a certain role or a certain position. Obviously, you got to watch your man running off you. But, you can. It's like in football, soccer. You got the free roll. You go where you want, and we'll defend around you because you're that creative. I think Petrocelli, I think I've said it on our last pod. I'd love to see Adam Simpson say to him, you've got the pace, work on your engine. I want to set you the challenge of being a wingman. That's a role that we might have available. Here's the challenge for you. Go and work on your tank and try and make that your own, because that could be a spot for you that potentially opens up. So we'll see what happens there. He could be a player as well that's looked at by other clubs come trade week now that Langdon is in. We probably haven't thought of that, Drewy. There could be someone that goes. Petrocelli's the Victorian. I wouldn't rule that out, that Petch gets traded, even though I'd say it's unlikely. But speaking of that wing role, another player that could come in, this is exciting for Eagles fans, that could open up the possibility of that void being filled or someone else moving into it, is Alex Witherden from Brisbane. And that would be a very interesting get. The reports are that the Eagles are interested.
Yeah, so actually a player I've enjoyed following, probably more due to fantasy footy, sort of early in his career, and you develop a bit of love for him. But I think he's a well-liked player. Sort of popular at Brisbane, has a bit of personality, and has endeared himself to the players there and the fans. But just slipped out of, favour with Chris Fagan. He had a couple of bad moments, I think, in the semi-final against the Giants the season before in terms of his defensive work. And then, Birchall came in and was playing that sort of rebounding defender role. Answorth was getting the nod ahead of him. Ryan Lester had a great season at Brisbane, so he just sort of found himself on the outer. So I think he's got at least 2 years left on his contract. But he definitely fits into our system, doesn't he? Like, you can imagine Witherden biting off kicks off the half-back flank. But, a few people, and I just floated it on Twitter the other day, was that, could he be modelled into a wingman as a accumulating wingman? Whether he's got the tank to do that we don't know. But yeah, he fits what we need right now, which is a good kick, established in the competition. He's going to help us straight away. And there might be an appetite from Witherden to get somewhere new and get himself, locked into a best 22.
I did some reading on him, hoping that he played some midfield or wing in his junior footy. It doesn't seem like there's too much evidence of that. It seems as if he's always been a crafty half-back. So, yeah, maybe you'd have to work on the tank a fair bit to fill that role that we identify as being, a bit of a void that needs filling at the Eagles. But, yeah, he's valuable in a couple of senses. So Shannon Hearn's probably going into his last season. So we're going to need another half-back as much as we have an abundance of players in that position. And they're going to want to move Liam Duggan into the midfield. Like, it just seems natural. He played well there when there were opportunities. Of course, at the end of last season, the likes of Shuey, Jack Redden, they've got Shuey's probably got 2 to 3 more years. Jack Redden, it looks like 1 to 2. So they're going to have to move Liam Duggan on the ball a little bit more, and that frees up a spot at halfback, of course, which Witherden can fill. So, yeah, it's an exciting one. He's a really good user. Yeah, he'd have to make up for some defensive lapses, but in our defence, you'd think there's enough quality around and enough of a strong defensive mentality for him to get around that. I think it'd be a really good get if we can get him, like a really exciting player for the Eagles moving forward that could fill a couple of roles, but also free up other players into roles that could improve the team. So I like that we're being aggressive in that regard. In terms of the pick that might get him, some people are linking the Tom Hickey trade to Sydney as being simply a pass-on pick to Brisbane. I'm not sure that is how it would work, Drewy. I don't think Brisbane would simply cop the pick that we get for Tom Hickey when he goes to Sydney. I think they'd want a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with that. The question is, what are we getting for Hickey? He's a sort of a backup ruckman who I guess are content to play that role, can be quite valuable. Hickey's a solid citizen, comes in and does the job every time, basically, when called upon. And we should recognise the fact that Sydney kind of need a ruckman. And if Hickey's available and willing to make that move, we should be trying to get a good price for him. But what do you think? Second round?
Maybe, because you can demand a little bit more for rucks because they are valuable in that sense. There aren't many of them around. You need them. So you can say, well, you've got the bargaining power in a way. You need this player. You can't just go and find an established second ruck with a mature body anywhere in the comp. You can almost demand just a little bit more than probably what Tom Hickey is worth and get a slightly better return. So maybe it works out in that sense, and you can pass that pick on to Brisbane for Alex Witherden. Hickey is the one that we have to move on because he's got some currency. Like, Vardy's body's just not up to it. That clubs will take as much of a punt on him and give up as much for him. So Hickey's the one you move on when you consider that Oscar Allen has claimed the second ruck position for Nick Nat, and Bailey Williams looks a talent. So it was always one of Hickey or Vardy that was going to go, and Hickey makes sense in terms of trade currency. So then you'd think Nathan Vardy stays on, Drewy, but he's got to get his body right, and he hasn't done a thing since that brilliant 2018 grand final, has he? So hopefully it works out in that sense, but then you're also worried about list size and cap space. I don't know, there's a possibility Vardy doesn't get a contract either, and you're going in with Nick Nat, Allen and Bailey Williams into next season, which leaves us a little bit light on potentially. That will be interesting.
Yeah, I can't imagine that we would do that. We have got Jamison, who's a ruck prospect, but I would highly doubt that he would be ready, if there was some sort of crisis. I just think for everyone's peace of mind, as much as Nick Nat's, fit and firing, we don't want to overexert him. What if Bailey Williams does his ACL, Jamison's not ready, and we don't have Vardy? Then you can't rest Nick Nat if he needs one. So I think that's just something. Ruck insurance is just something that we have to cop whilst Nick Nat is our number one ruck. So, I think Vardy probably does get another contract, and let's just hope that he can stay fit, and get himself right. But one thing that we will be able to bank on, Garby, is that it sounds as though there's going to be essentially a waiver wire next season, which rolls through once a month. So if we did have a couple of injuries in the ruck, or you had a deficiency in your list, I think by round 4, you're going to have an opportunity to put in a waiver request for a ruckman outside of the AFL. So there is going to be, I think, a bit more list flexibility because the list sizes will be less. But second or third round pick for Hickey, if we can flick that on to Brisbane, maybe we've got to, upgrade a pick of theirs in the 60s into our pick in the 50s, or, something like that.
Future second rounder, maybe.
Yeah. I think if they're fair income and all in about trying to win a premiership, then, you just kind of do what you have to do to get the deal done without going too silly, because Witherden's a player that could help us get there.
I think other clubs will go in for Witherden. I don't think we'll be the only one. I don't think it's simply a case of West Coast doing a deal. Like, he's shown too much for other clubs not to be interested.
It looked like Carlton were keen, and then they went out and they've recruited Zach Williams and Adam Sard. So in terms of getting a rebounding defender, like, the Giants might want one to replace Williams and Heath Shaw. So maybe they're interested. I mean, you can go through. They don't grow on trees, but, West Coast have shown the impetus and they're on the front foot, so that counts for something.
So who are the other players that are on the trade table? Because Adam Simpson came out and he said, look, we're going to be active. We're going to have to turn over the list because we want to have a crack at a flag. But also he knows he needs to start getting the list ready for when some of our legends retire in the next couple of seasons. Who are the other players that you think we might be having a little sniff at, Drewy?
Well, I think it's a fact that we've been speaking to Jordan Clark's management, and we've already spoken about how we think he'd be a really great fit. But from everything that we've read and that we've heard, it sounds as though Fremantle are being or are the front runners to get him at the moment. It sounds as though Clark is definitely open to staying at Geelong. But with the Cats bringing in Isaac Smith, who's a wingman, Sean Higgins looks like he's heading there as well as an established midfielder. That's a lot of mouths to feed, isn't it? When you consider their midfield depth is already pretty impressive with Menegola and Guthrie having breakthrough years. So, the Jordan Clark one's is really interesting. I think we both agree he'd be a great fit at West Coast. I'm not sure.
So I'll pose something to you. If you had to pick right now, Jordan Clark or Alex Witherden, who are you taking?
I'd go Clark.
Yeah,
but only because of his age, and he's a WA boy. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's a situation where we'd end up with both, is there?
No, potentially, but it seems if Freo are the front runners, surely we're a better fit though. Yeah, I can't see us making both deals happen. Just in terms of trade value, I just don't know how we've got the capabilities to do it unless they do a straight swap of Brander for Clark. That's the possibility. But I just don't see how we'll be able to make the trade work otherwise without giving up too many draft picks. But Clark would be a better fit for us than Freo. I mean, they've already got Chera, Brayshaw, Sarong, and a couple others coming through. I just think there's more opportunity at the Eagles. He can play that wing role and then step in for a Red and Shuey on the ball when he really develops, when those players move aside. It seems like there might be a better pathway, to a big midfield role for Jordan Clark at the Eagles as opposed to Freo, where, he's probably going to be fourth, fifth banana behind, those young players for the next 5 to 10 years if he goes there.
If you go through West Coast lists, the one thing that really stands out that we don't have is a real young gun midfielder, and Clark would be that. But that's why it feels like such a great fit for us. And the draft picks we've got this year, that's we're not going to get that out of the draft. Like if we use 34 on a midfielder, we're probably getting another player sort of similar to Ainsworth or O'Neill, that sort of level of talent, which is, they're getting there, but they're not like demanding a role in the midfield straight away. Not like we've seen Bailey Smith do and Hugh McCluggage and those sort of guys over the last few years. So that's what makes Clark so appealing, and I agree he does look a better fit. Fremantle have delisted Brett Bewley, I think, and he was basically one of their wingmen for most of last season. So I wonder if
cut him. He was decent.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe I should double check that.
I'm not sure about Brett Bewley. There's maybe someone of a similar nature. I'd be surprised if Bewley's gone.
Let me punch it into Google.
Yeah, so we'll wait and see on that regard. Look, maybe there's also the Tim Kelly deal. Perhaps there's a little bit of, I wouldn't say bad blood, but just a bit of fatigue when it comes to dealing with Geelong over a big deal. Maybe they don't want to go down that path again. I think it's worth investigating a swap of Brander. I think the Eagles are bullish on him. I'd like to see him achieve his best, but I just feel as though Jordan Clark would be such a handy asset for us for the reasons outlined moving forward. Hey, Jaden Stevens is an interesting one that Candace brings up on Twitter. That is one that I looked at and went, geez, he could be that player that we need as well, Jaden Stevenson. I can't see us making the deal happen for a variety of reasons, not having the currency to trade for him, Collingwood necessarily being a bit reluctant to give him up as much as he's had issues this season. But that, wing half forward, sparky type player, even though we brought in Zac Langdon, Jaden Stevenson could be an interesting one, but it's not one you could realistically see materialising.
He could also potentially, you plug him in as a wingman and you say, we know you've played good footy up forward, but this is where we see you playing as an outside wingman. Well, Brander for Stevenson, and maybe they give us a third rounder or something as well like that. That to me makes a bit of sense. If they're looking for another forward and trying to push Cox out, Collingwood are a tough one at the moment because they're trying to get rid of so many players to free up cap space. It'd be hard to deal with them at the moment. As far as Bewley goes, just doing the Googling, he's currently uncontracted, but he hasn't been delisted, so he's available.
Right.
Anyway, I mean, we need a wingman. So Brett Bewley, if you want to come across to West Coast, we've got space for you. The other, I was having a look at some other uncontracted players. I see Jed Anderson still hasn't got a contract at North Melbourne. He's available at the moment. Matt Suckling, Taylor Duray, as far as potential veteran wingmen or half-backers, they'd be available. But there's not too much around. But I spoke to a player last week, Garby, and he said there's never been so much unrest or upheaval amongst the playing group in terms of contracts and player movement. So this is, if you're ever going to go out there and get the player that you want, now's the time, because there are players who are worried about their futures, and that the player I spoke to said that there's been a definite shift towards we need to start looking after ourselves here as much as we want to be loyal. We don't know where the money's going to come from, where it's going, what the salary cap is going to be in 5 years, who knows? You've got to look after yourself and get paid and get a longer contract. So this is the time.
So does Lewis Jetta survive on the list? I don't think he does, looking at everything and looking at the player. If we get, say, Alex Witherden, I don't see how Lewis Jetta stays on the Eagles list.
Yeah, his potential versatility would be one of his assets if we wanted to keep him. But then his, the hit that we take on the salary cap by keeping him also, that probably counts against him as well. Do they think do they take into account the fact that he's been so good for Liam Ryan and Willie Riol, the young Indigenous players? Does the fact that he is their kind of their beacon and their guider, does that help him?
Probably, but he didn't play last season. Like, he played the first 4 games, I think one more, and that was it. So Adam Simpson was clearly off him last season for whatever reason. That only goes so far, especially when we're really mindful of bringing young players through. Yeah. Like, he's going to say, well, we're going to have a lot of turnover soon. Lewis Jetta's near the end of his career. I don't think you can mount a case to just keep him on for that. Like, if he's not playing, we've got to get a young player through. We've got to start bringing another youngster through on the list, giving him opportunities. If I'm not going to have Lewis Jetta in my best 22 and he's only got, at best, 2 seasons left at AFL level, I think he's up against it.
What about Quinton Narkle? Are we reticent in our duty as a footy club if we don't chat to Narkle, who's out of contract, and young midfield depth was something that we would like at the footy club? Is he someone we should be speaking to? I can't see how he'll be at Geelong next season.
I like Narkle a lot. I think he's got a lot of talent. He can play on ball. He's got a good engine. He fits what we need. So I think it's definitely a player we should be looking at. Again, how much would you have to give up for him? Geelong would rate him reasonably highly. He's shown enough at AFL level. So I'm not sure if we make the Witherden deal, whether we've got the picks to make that deal happen. But yeah, it's definitely a player we should be looking at. But, Clark should be the main priority, you would think, from the Cats.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Like, if we're going to get more than one player, someone's got to go. Like Hickey's obviously on the way out, but I know Petruccelli's just signed a new contract. If anything, that makes his value a little bit more. Brander, and in terms of currency, the tradable players, probably Petruccelli and Brander are the 2 that you can think of. Other than that, they're either too important or not established.
So Paul Jones asked again on Twitter, how do we get Alex Witherden? We did speak about this on a previous pod. Delisted free agent. Can you do father-son again? Like, certain that you can't. You can't do father-son twice, surely. No. Is the draft the only option? So can you see the Eagles drafting Alex Witherden now that he's sort of over his issues now and, has clearly got a lot of talent?
I think, Garby, that once you've been delisted by a footy club, you're a free agent for life. So I think you could sign him as a free agent whenever you want.
Right. So is that just a fait accompli for the Eagles? Can you see them just doing that?
Well, it's either that or there are rules about how many draft picks you have to use. So the Eagles might use Alex Witherden, let's say, as one of their draft picks because it means, he's sort of a locked-in pickup. They know what they're getting rather than taking a punt on, someone at pick. Like, they could get Witherden at pick 90, right? Like, if not, like, as far as they wouldn't do it if there were other clubs that were interested. But if the Eagles knew that no one else wanted Witherden, they could just say, we're going to spend that pick 90 on getting Alec into the footy club. Because you may as well, as opposed to just picking him up as a delisted free agent, because you have to use at least 2 draft picks, I think, this season. So, yeah, if we're only going off what people are saying, that, Waterman's been good in the waffle and is in a better place, I don't see why you wouldn't look at him if he's available and there's space for him.
So has he been? I mean, I haven't followed it enough. I know that we drafted him and then he had issues with illness when he first came to the club, and that rocked him for a couple of years, gone back to the waffle, done really well. Has he been that good that it's just, you've got to pick this kid up? Is it like almost Liam Ryan waffle type standard, like he has to be drafted? I just haven't been across how good he's been as much as I've read the reports.
Yeah, I don't think the buzz is that Liam Ryan level, but he played well in the grand final. I think he'd had a good season up until that point. And I guess, it's kind of like Ashton Hamps. He kicked 4 goals in a grand final in the Waffle, and the Eagles drafted him sort of off the back of that. So, it's like playing well in the Sheffield Shield final. Sometimes it gets you a gig in the Australian team. So, and again, if the Eagles have the capability next season to pick up players during the season through the waiver wire, then Alex Witherden would be someone who would be a candidate. The only thing is that the longer you leave it, the more chance is that another club comes in. So I think he'd be on the radar, that's for sure.
All right, so let's look at some of the players that we delisted by the Eagles just to finish off, Drewy, some of our changes. I mean, Francis Watson was the one that Eagles fans were upset about because he looked as if he was going to be a bit of a player, wasn't he? I mean, there was a bit of buzz around him, and as he was about to break in, he did his knee, and I guess the Eagles have just said, well, there's too much for you to do, too many players in that position. So the list size is changing. Unfortunately, we can't keep persisting. Nick Reed and Hamish Brayshaw, 2 other players who were cut by the club. What did you make of the changes to the list and those players that have been told, unfortunately, your time is up?
Well, it looks like the Nick Reed delisting was almost the precursor to Langdon coming in.
Yeah,
he was, and Anthony Tracy got delisted as well, who was also a mature age prospect as a small forward. So they knew that they were going to go that way with Langdon, so they had to make room for him. So that, I guess, that makes sense. It was nice to see Reed get a go, and I liked I liked the thinking where they brought him to the Waffle team to sort of fill a void and see if he could cut the mustard. And that's a good place for us to be. It's like what Geelong did with Tom Stewart. They saw him in the GFL and gave him a crack. And if it works 1 out of 10 times, then it's worth it. And as far as the canoe, Hamish Brayshaw goes, sad. I'm actually genuinely sad to see him go, but there wasn't going to be space for him. He was probably already one of sort of the last people on the list. So I'm just really happy that he got that game and got to celebrate and be a part of a really great win.
Yeah, I mean, they got cracks at it. Brayshaw certainly could have done with a bit more time to see how he developed, but as you said, cap space and the players there, it's going to be hard. Reed's mature age, so he got a crack. He looked good in his first game, but against Richmond in that game, there were a couple moments when I went, the step up to AFL standard is probably a bridge too far for him, like coming from the amateurs, then to the Waffle, then to the AFL at 24 already. You're asking a bit much, and there are a couple of times when you went, wow, it's probably just a step too far in standard, and when you're already mature age, you don't have the luxury of time to develop. Like, you've got to come in and show it a bit more straight away. That's just the harsh reality of it. So he got that crack, but unfortunately it just wasn't enough. And Watson, the amount of players we've now got in that position, it's so sad that it hasn't quite happened for him. Hopefully he goes back to the Waffle and does well and gets a crack at another club, or another club takes a crack at him on the rookie list. But there's not too much in terms of picking holes that you can do in terms of our delistings, that they all make a lot of sense, unfortunately, for the players who are leaving. And they all seem, especially in Brayshaw's case, to have taken it in really good grace, Drewy.
Yeah, and just on Watson quickly, I wouldn't be surprised if he continued to rehab his knee at the club. So the connection may continue with West Coast, and there might be a chance that it could be rekindled in future. But I could understand their hesitance to have someone who's just done their ACL on the list a little bit longer, when really this was the season that he probably had to make the leap. So, any other questions or feedback from the social media followers, Garby?
I think that just about covers it. Oh, there was one from Candice as well. She wanted to know about Sam Taylor from GWS, key defender who might be available. Do we look at him now that Will Schofield's retired? I'm not sure we'd do that, because they like Harry Edwards. They really do. They brought him in for a big game against Geelong at home, and he only played for 10 minutes before getting concussed, but he looked pretty good in that period. And the fact that they brought him in that for that game shows that they rate him really highly. So I think he's the next one to step up. I can't see us making a move for another key defender. Thoughts on that?
Well, Sam Taylor, I think, is going to be a star. So I'm not sure the GWS would want to play ball on it, to be honest, either. So it would cost us a lot to get him back. So we'll just wait until he's a free agent, Garby, a bit down the track and wants to come home, just like we're doing with Paddy Cripps.
Yeah. I'm not sure Paddy Cripps' shoulders will be in any state by the time he wants to come home. Like, I've always thought he's going to be so banged up because of the work he's done at Carlton that, you know, by that stage of his career, I mean, he'll still be class in some way, shape or form, but he's not going to be the same player. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll wait and see. But Drewy, it's been good talking over the trades. Nice to have a short pod and just crack one out and go over things that are happening at the moment. And hopefully we got another couple of these through the trade period. Hopefully the Eagles' activity continues to be of a high nature.
Well, it might force our hand. We might have to do emergency podcasts when Witherden, Clark, Cripps, and every other good player lands at the club, hopefully.
Hopefully, mate. So, yeah, it's shaping up nicely. We never used to be a club that was active in the trade period. It's really nice to see that we are at the moment, and it gives us some excitement ahead of next season, of course, after 2 campaigns that have fallen short of expectations. So, yeah, let's hope there's a couple more big names coming to the club. We welcome Zac Langdon. Delighted to have him, and, we've got a bit more of the trade period to play out. Let's hope the Eagles land a couple more big fish. Drewy, thanks for your time on the Nest on this emergency trade pod.
Thank you, Garby. Rate, review, subscribe to The Nest.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.